So, my name is Mario. I just got back from the go-kart track, and I get to deliver today's message. We're talking about fun today. And so, I want to tell you a little bit about who I am. My name isn't actually Mario. It just is for today because I don't want to, I don't want to be the one guy not in costume. I had a lot of choices. I decided on this one. But my name is Jake. I'm an early part of the church plant here at Converge Community. We met Mitch and Mackenzie, gosh, a little over 2 years ago now, when the bridge was first starting to talk about planting a new church, and we heard their vision for what this church could become and what they were trying to do and how they wanted to infuse fun as a means of reaching people that wouldn't otherwise be found at church. And that message, that idea really spoke to me. So that was probably the biggest motivating factor for me to leave a church that I had grown to love. Pastor Jeff over at the bridge had married me and my wife together. Like, I loved that place, but this vision that Mitch and Mackenzie had was something that was really profound and different, and something that I thought we could be a big part of. So what I do here now, you guys see me a lot of times on stage, or drums, or singing. That's one of the big roles I serve here, is doing worship. But I also spend time working on the building search team. I spend time with the finance team, and then I spend time on the church staff. Staff basically meaning we'll go and meet at Mitch's house and talk about things, and yeah, it's a wonderful paying role, I'll tell you what. So, anyways, these last few weeks and months, we've really, as a staff, been trying to dial into talking about just the things that are really building the building blocks of our church. What are the things that we're built on? And we're working on a thing, we called it a vision frame. So this is mostly a set of definitions that I think defines what our church has been over the last 2 years, but also what we want to continue to be, the areas that we care about the most, the places we want to spend some focus into. So we've identified and adopted a lot of these things after seeing what these last 2 years have looked like. And these are things that we just want to hold true to. So I want to take you guys back. Anybody ever take a journalism class growing up? Yeah, a couple of us. You guys probably remember that you had to cover who, what, where, when, why, how. Does that all sound familiar? Yeah. That's basically what this vision frame is. It's all of the who, what, when, where stuff, so that we kind of know how to frame what we're trying to do. So Mitch introduced some of this to you last week. We talked about our mission mandate, and this is what we do. The mission mandate was engaging people with purpose. And Mitch talked about how Jesus did this, how Jesus went out and he would speak to people, he would heal the sick, he would restore sight to the blind. And through this, he built a base of followers. So Jesus did that, and we as a church can do that too. Some of the ways that we as Converge want to chase that same mission, we need to start by trying to build genuine relationships. That's important to us. And then the next thing is we need to fulfill a purpose for the other people, the folks that we're trying to engage. So that's what we're doing. We're engaging people with purpose. That's our mission mandate. It's what we do in the equation. The next thing Mitch introduced was the missional map. This is how we accomplish that. So we get to spend some time talking about the map. Now, if you look, we've got the triangle on here. Did anybody remember the Building Discipleship Culture book with the triangle in it? There's a thing in there called up, in, and out. Up, in, and out, and that's the shape of the triangle. And what that is, it's a reminder to us of just a way to try to keep things in balance and in check. So as a church body, we need to remember to take care of the members inside the church, to be developing one another, to be growing together, to be focusing on building our own personal relationships with God. In addition to that, we also need to be reaching outside of our walls to go engage other people. And then the last part of that, the up element, is obviously then trying to maintain that relationship with God, with Jesus, and being in constant communication with God. So this ties into our missional motive, or our missional mandate, which is, or the missional map, I'm all over the place. There's so many missional somethings, which is to engage, encounter, and equip. We talked about those 3 words last week. Engaging being our inward focus. This is how we are No, I got those wrong. Uh, engage is our outward focus. Engage is where we reach out to the community around us, and we are trying to bring people into what we're doing here. Equipping is when we're focusing on our personal skills. These are the things that we're trying to develop here at the church. And then encounter is when we look up to God and try to have those encountering kinds of experiences. What I get to introduce today is the missional motives. And this is more of the why we do what we do. So we had actually spent some time talking about an acronym that you've seen come up a couple times now, and I get to introduce the first part of that acronym, which is FORMED. And with FORMED, this is the why we do what we do. We have identified that these are the things that really drive us as a congregation. The one I'm going to speak about today is the fun orientation or fun philosophy. This is something that, obviously we're out here having eating contests and wearing goofy costumes. You get to hear a message from Mario that'll be on videotape forever. This is just a part of how we do things here at Converge. We try to infuse fun wherever we can because it's something that we believe is important. And when Mitch asked me to give this message, I spent some time just trying to figure out, like, what in the world? Why did he pick me? I finally realized it was just the mullet. Anybody that has a mullet's probably a pretty fun guy. Not that I'm like a mushroom or anything, but so I think he chose me because we've had a lot of conversations about this fun philosophy. This is one of the things, again, that brought me to Converge from a place that I was very happy to be at already. And so one of the things that I just believe is that the power of fun experiences can do to create an opportunity to engage other people. And we actually can see this if we look into Matthew. So I'm going to pull up Matthew, Matthew chapter 9, verses 9 through 13, and we'll read this. It says, "As Jesus went on from there, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at the tax collector's booth. 'Follow me,' he told him. Matthew got up and followed him. While Jesus was having dinner at Matthew's house, many tax collectors and sinners came and ate with him and his disciples. When the Pharisees saw this, they asked his disciples, 'Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?' On hearing this, Jesus said, 'It's not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. But go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. For I have not come to call the righteous, but to call the sinners.'" What's interesting about this is this same exact story shows up in two other gospel books. You'll see it also in Mark 2 and in Luke 5. One of the things that I've found about repetition in the Bible is that usually means it's important. I think this is an important story. In those other two books, they actually call him Levi because he had two names. He was Matthew and Levi, depending on which book you're reading, but they are the same guy. Why I believe that this was important is it speaks to what Matthew did. So Jesus comes up, sees him collecting taxes, and you have to understand that nobody really liked tax collectors. These were folks that were usually, they got paid a commission to collect these taxes, and they were often very rich. They were, nobody wanted to go and give them these tax dollars, but that was their job. So they weren't really well loved across the world, especially you see the Pharisees kind of pointing that out. But he had all these folks come over to his house, and he decided, I'm going to have a party. I want everybody that I know to get to know this guy. So he invites all his friends, all his tax collector buddies, and they all have a dinner. They have, I'm sure there was some wine. And then Jesus is sitting there and finds a way to mold hearts in the middle of this party full of sinners and tax collectors, which, depending on who you ask, could be considered some pretty skeezy people. So I just love that. Jesus can find a way in that atmosphere, and he does. What I love about this is that Matthew was engaging folks from different kinds of crowds. It wasn't all just one type of person. It was a whole bunch of different groups of people that came together at his house, and Jesus found a way to mold people through that. As I was reading through that and preparing for today's message, it reminded me of something that we used to do a long time ago at our house, and we called it New Beer Friday. This is an old graphic that we used on Facebook. This was a way for us to engage our friends. And really, the concept is pretty simple. drink a beer that you've never had. Come to my house, drink a beer that you've never had. And at the time, I was learning how to brew beer. I was brewing in the garage. I said, if you've never had Bud Light with lime, that counts. But if you can't come up with a beer you've never had, I have made one that you've never had. And so you can try that. So it used to be there would be 4 or 5 of us the first week, and then a few weeks in, we got up to maybe 10 people. But by the end of a couple of years of doing this once a month, we had 60 to 65 people show up at our house every month. It was a really incredible experience. One of the things that I found fascinating is that I would meet people, maybe between 5 and 10 new people every single month that we would do this. I didn't care if they came from my neighborhood or I invited folks from where I lived. I invited folks from work. I invited folks from my beer trading clubs. I invited friends from my church or the worship team that I was playing on there. All of these things, you get all these groups of people that came together, and it was just such a neat atmosphere because you can kind of set things down and just relate to one another, become friends, and this atmosphere set that up for us. One of the things that I thought was really interesting is that Jesus would make his way into conversations, much like he did at the table with Matthew. He would find his way into conversations. People would say, how do you guys know Jake? Oh, yeah, we play on the worship team together at church. And they'd look at me and say, you guys let him on a worship stage? Yeah, sure, okay. But what I think happened is it helped people to realize that if a guy like me can serve in that kind of role at the front of a church building, that maybe this Christianity thing isn't all bad. Maybe there's some cool stuff about it. I don't have to be Jesus to go to church. You have to love Jesus, but you don't have to be him yet. That's not necessarily where we're going to start. So I spent some more time processing this because one of the things that I really was fascinated by is we would actually find people that would come to New Beer Friday, and then that following Sunday would sometimes show up to church with us. What was cool about this is that they had already met maybe 10 to 15 people that go to that church. So we'd see them in the lobby, we'd go say hi, they'd feel really welcome and comfortable and at home because they'd met these folks in a comfortable setting already. These are people that weren't going to church, came to a beer event and decided, yeah, it's time for me to go to church. So why would that change of heart come up? And as I think about it, I think one of the things that happens is that fun creates opportunities for joy. I think there's a difference between the two. Fun is an activity. Fun is getting in your go-kart and chasing your friends down the road throwing banana peels. That's fun. Fun is going to a football game or a hockey game last night. Fun is an active thing. You're part of an activity, watching a concert. Joy is more of a state of mind. I think joy is something that you internalize, and it almost always comes from a fun experience. Joy is something that sticks with you after that activity ends. Joy is something that I think you exude from your body. This is something that even if you're not talking, you are telling everybody that you're joyful right now. So I'm just gonna ask this question real quick. Who here has something that has caused them to feel like they were in a state of joy lately? Anybody in this room? Aiden. Yeah. That's a good example. Now, Aiden, what do you think made that joy show up? Do you think it was the fun activity that preceded that? Well, you're smashing my goals here, man. No, so a lot of times these fun activities set up an opportunity for joy. That's what I love. So when I realized that these two things were different, it was a long, long time ago. 10 years ago, at about this time, I was in the middle of a divorce, and that was a tough time. It was a hard place to be in life. You don't like those moments. I was at home some nights without my kids, and I didn't have much to do. And I found myself kind of dwelling on some of the negative things, the feelings, the emotions that come with that. I decided I really needed to find something to do. And so some friends of mine were into snowboarding. I am not super athletic, but I thought, well, let's give it a shot. So I went up snowboarding with, so this is the older of a couple of photos here. This is the group that kind of got me started with snowboarding. And this friend ended up being in my wedding. So like somebody that I grew really close to over this period of time. And I started snowboarding, and I started to get kind of good at it, and we would do it twice, maybe 3 times a week sometimes. And after a while, I remember I was driving home one night, and I just thought, man, I think that's the first time I've had fun in a long time. Like I just had this profound realization that something was different, something was good and positive and awesome in that moment. And I thought that I was realizing that I just had fun for the first time, but what I think in retrospect is that I was realizing I was in a state of joy. I had gotten past. My mind had turned from dwelling on some of the things that were holding me back to moving forward into thinking more about the things that were good in my life, the joy that was there. So I think that this was a really incredible moment for me. I can look back on it and I can point to that moment in time as when stuff started to change for me. So the other thing that I think is interesting too is I didn't necessarily experience that joy the first time I went snowboarding. It was probably the 5th or the 6th. So sometimes you might need to be part of several fun activities before that joy starts to show up. But when it does, what I'll tell you is it's an overwhelming feeling, right? It's big. It's monumental. It makes it so you really can't even help but smile and just be happy to be where you are. I remember just sitting in the car. When I was on that drive home, I wasn't a Christian yet. I didn't pray or anything, but I just remember just dwelling on this thought, and I just couldn't stop thinking about how happy I was right then. So joy is something that you definitely want more of. When you experience it, you want more of that feeling. It's awesome. The other thing is that now this feeling of joy was associated with the activity that we were doing and the group of people that I was doing it with. These people made me think of that feeling again. I loved it. So the Bible actually directs us a little bit to look for joy too. In Proverbs, which is largely considered a book of wisdom, it says, "A joyful heart makes a cheerful face. But when the heart is sad, the spirit is broken." Spirit is broken. With a broken spirit, I think it's difficult to really have a whole lot of hope in anything. It's difficult to get excited to go do anything. So having a broken spirit is not where we want to be. So it says that a joyful heart makes a cheerful face. So what we should be chasing is have a joyful heart. So another example of this would be in the book Ecclesiastes. Me, within my huddle, we've been doing the whole Bible in 1 year. And so I'm going to give you a little bit of background on Ecclesiastes. We listen to just a little bit out of these books each day, and the reader goes on, and he'll I think Ecclesiastes took a couple weeks to get through, but he starts reading. It's an audiobook, and the first words of this whole book are meaningless, and he just goes on to say everything is meaningless. This book is written by Solomon, who was considered to be one of the wisest person on earth. When he became king, he asked God for wisdom. And he comes up here and says, everything is meaningless. He actually doesn't use the word meaningless. He says hevel, which is the Hebrew word. And hevel actually means, it's like smoke or vapor. It's something that looks big. It looks more impressive than what it really is, but you can't grab onto it. It just kind of floats away. So the closest English translation is meaningless. And he says that possessions are meaningless, and accomplishments are meaningless, and pleasure is meaningless. It just says everything is meaningless. This is the wisest man in the world that has achieved everything and has anything that he wants, but it's all meaningless. In 8:15, he says something that sounds a little contrary to all this. He says, "So I recommend having fun because there's nothing better for people in this world than to eat, drink, and enjoy life. That way they will experience some happiness along with all the hard work God gives them under the sun." And when you look at the rest of this book and how he finishes this book, he really talks about trying to find a way to, instead of setting your sights on having $18 million, why not try to find something today? What can we do today to add joy into your lives? Instead of getting stuck on the fact that I'm not king of the world right now, what can we enjoy today? And I love this particular section because it directs us to kind of focus and live in this moment. You're going to live your best life if you continue to live day by day based on what God has given to you, both from provisional standpoint, but also from a work standpoint. He says to do what you can do today. So moving forward, I think that when we find these opportunities to bring more and more joy into our lives, we actually invite other people into our lives a little bit more with that. If we're a church that's trying to bring in the unchurched to get to know Jesus, I think we want to be a church full of people that are just beaming with joy as much as possible. So to demonstrate some of this, I love college football. My wife dressed up as a Husker today. I'm just delighted. This is great. Love college football. And I've got a picture of a college football game. And there's one person here that looks like he's full of joy right now. And one of the things that I think is fun about this picture, he's maybe a little aggressive with his taunting, but I just like to think that if I was going to go to dinner and I had to pick one of these people in this picture to go with, which one would it be? Man, I'm going with number 3. I want to go and feed off of some of his energy. That just sounds like a lot of fun. He's going to be a much more pleasant dude to be around after whatever happened in this Auburn-Georgia game. So I want to hang around the people that are most joyful. Think about this in the way that people invite you to things. Hey, I'm having a party. There's a friend or two that might be showing up. Yeah, if you're bored later, you can come out too. You want to go to that? Nobody wants to do that. No, I've got 16 people coming over. We're gonna make ice cream. I don't know, but I want to go to that party now. Who wants to make ice cream later? So think about the way that we're talking. We want to convey this position of joy, and some of this comes from you really need to get yourself to a state of joy to do that. But I really believe that these fun experiences provide that opportunity for joy to be born. So the last little bit I want to get into is talking about joy as a building block for hope. And if you look at Romans 15:13, it says, "May the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace in believing, so that by the power of the Holy Spirit you may abound in hope." I mean, isn't this what Christianity is about? We're searching for something to be hopeful for because there is a lot of junk. There's just a lot of junk. But God inspires hope in us. And He does this. It specifically says that you have to be full of joy and peace and believing so that you can abound in hope. And I think that that's just really profound for us. So we've got to get ourselves to a place to set that up. If we want to have hope, we really need to set the stage and kind of get those building blocks in place. So in thinking about that, I just believe that when we go back and look at that proverb even, that you have a broken spirit, I think it's really hard to be full of hope if you have a broken spirit. And it's one way to avoid that is to have a joyful heart. So what we need to do really is to set up more opportunities for fun to create joy in each of us. So I want to get into kind of summarizing things here real quick. As I do that, I want to invite the worship team to come back up. So to really wrap things up, I think fun creates opportunities for joy. And this is kind of on the equipping side of our 3 things: the equip, engage, and encounter, to equip us with the building blocks to be able to be ready for joy. It's mostly tied to that. I think joy attracts people to you. This is the engaging part. This is how we get people to see us from the other side. You know what? Jake's got something pretty good going on in his life. I don't know what it is, but there's something about him. I kind of just want to be there. I want to achieve that too. So engaging people. And then joy leads to hope, which is how we encounter God. We have hope in our Savior Jesus. We have hope in a resurrected body that changed the whole world. So these are the reasons that I'm just compelled to believe that fun is such an important part of what we do here as a church, but I think it's such an important part of what we need to live into just as believers. So with that, I want to challenge you guys that with Engage Weekend coming up this next weekend, what fun activity can you plan to set the stage for joy in your lives and in the lives of others? I'm going to have Carter play some music in the background for me while you think about it. Maybe just give it a minute and think about ways that you can set that stage. How do you provide the opportunity for joy to show up in your life or in somebody else's life next weekend?